brothers and sisters to the funeral services for Brother Jathan Partridge. I'm Bishop Russell Olson, and it's an honor for me to have been asked to conduct these services. The family prayer was just offered by Clark Partridge, and we'd like to also recognize and thank our organist, Sister Becky Clyde, our chorister, Julie Stedman, and Brother Tom Durham for providing the broadcast for us. We'll begin today's, and I'd also like to recognize on the stand with me my second counselor, Brother David Johnson, and his wife Sonia. We'll begin by singing hymn number 293, Each Life That Touches Ours for Good, after which the opening prayer will be offered by Cynthia Partridge.
Our dear Heavenly Father, how grateful we are this day that we can gather as friends and family of Jalen Partridge to honor him, to show our respects and love for him. We're grateful for the life which he has led, for his kindness, for his generosity, for his service to others. We're grateful for the husband and father and grandfather and uncle, brother, and family member that he has been. We ask you to help us to have thy spirit with us, that we'll be able to remember the good times that we've had and keep them in our hearts. We ask at this time a special blessing to be upon Merrilee and his children, that they will be able to feel comforted, That way they will be able to feel him close when it's needed, that they will know he is watching over them and that he has not left them alone. We're so grateful for the resurrection. We're thankful for the gospel of Jesus Christ here on this earth. We're so grateful for the life that Jalen led and how he has touched each of our hearts. Again, we ask that thy Spirit will be here with us in this meeting as we share memories and celebrate his life. And we say these things in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
The service will proceed as follows. There will be memories of Jalen Partridge by family and friends, and that will be coordinated and introduced by Adam Partridge. Following that, we'll have a message from Brother David Johnson and James Epps, and we'll go to that point.
I'll introduce the way it's going to happen, and then Adam will get up. As we met with Mom and the 7 of us and our spouses, I love that hymn and the words, the title, each life that touches ours for good. And we felt that as we met. We wanted everybody to have an opportunity to impress, to share those feelings. All of us have been to a traditional LDS fast and testimony meeting. And so there is some guidelines so that all that are impressed to share can share. We're going to ask you to keep it to 60 to 90 seconds. Keep it appropriate for where we're at, the chapel that we're in, and something that would bring honor to our father, Jalen. It can be just a few words to a few sentences to just a minute and a half. And so Adam will do this to set an example for us, and then we'll go for about 20 minutes for family and friends, and then I'll get up and designate it just for families at that point. Thank you.
Well, Dad loved to laugh. That's the whole reason we're doing this, because my favorite memory of Dad is Dad telling stories. Everybody here has heard of, so I told him, and I says, but most of this was when he was a teenager and he was in high school and his appendix ruptured and he went to the hospital over to Payson. Well, while he was over there, he had tickets to the Guess Who, I think it was the Guess Who, up at the Salt Palace or Saltaire or one of those salty places. He really wanted to go, but he couldn't because he was in the hospital. So my mother and one of his friends, they went over there, and since it was just one little hospital, they snuck him out the window. They took him up there to the concert, and he said he had a blast. He was miserable the whole time. He was in such pain, but he had such a blast. And they got him home, and they got him back in his hospital room before anybody knew he was gone. But please, we want friends and family both up here. We were thinking family, of course. We also want to hear from his good friends that knew him just as good or better than anybody else. We want to hear from Dave. We want to hear from Reed if you want to, from JT or anybody else that wants to get up here and say anything. But please come up and, again, be respectful at times so that everybody else can get up here and tell a story.
I had to write down my thoughts, but first I wanted to really thank all of our family, friends, and neighbors, like from the bottom of all of our hearts, for just such a great outpouring of support this week. Like, it's really made the world for us. I mean, it's been a really hard week, and with everything that happens in the world these days, like, it's good to know that we have so many good people around us supporting us through really hard times. So thank you for being so kind to us all. And I have so many stories and memories of my dad. It was really hard for me to narrow it down, but the two that I just wanted to talk on just briefly was my love of good classic rock, and my car obsession comes from my dad. When I was little, really little, I don't even remember when, I would tell everybody that my favorite band was the Grateful Dead. And I think that it was because my dad coached me to say that, because I think he thought it was funny for a little kid to say that their favorite band was the Grateful Dead. But later on, we would take a lot of trips in the diesel or the car, and we always listen to music, but we listen to the Doobie Brothers a lot, so that has to be one of my top 5 favorite bands. And eventually we were able to convince my husband Shane that he liked them too. It took years, but a few years back, Shane and my dad and my kids and Mike all went to see the Doobie Brothers in concert, and we ate a lot of nachos and we sang at the top of our lungs and danced around and had fun, and it was a great memory. My love of cars comes from my dad too. From the time I can remember, we always stopped at the Fiesta Days car show on my birthday, and it just led to a lot of time, over the years talking cars and working on cars. So I really appreciate all of the times I got to spend with my dad, and all of the lessons I've learned, and the service that he's given to all of my family. It's great to be able to come here and honor him and remember him. And like I say, I really appreciate you all being here for us.
I'm not prepared with any notes by any stretch. I'm up here winging it like Jalen would. In all honesty, I feel like I'm right down to that last acre of hay when you're just hoping you can get through it without exploding and ruining the equipment before you get through. So I want to share a lesson that Jalen taught me. I mean, it's a crazy lesson. I used to go everywhere with him. I'd come home from school, or I'd come in the house and he'd say, "Hey, we're taking off," and it was always to Nevada or to Colorado, somewhere. Go look at cows or go sell some hay, or you never knew where we were going. But I mean, sometimes 2, 3, 4 times a month. I never had a question about it. I had a bag packed because I knew you never knew when it was going to happen. So one day I came home and it was just before school was about to start. He says, "Hey, me and Lynn Sorensen, we're taking off. You coming with us?" And well, you don't have to ask. Of course I am. So I grabbed my bag that I always had packed, had a couple of days worth of clothes and toothbrush and everything you need. So I never crossed my mind to ask where we were going. I just, it's just another trip somewhere. And he didn't say anything. And finally we got headed north. He says, "Well, where are we going?" He says, "We're going to Alaska." Well, it's August. I got summer clothes. I guess we can go to Alaska. Okay. And I didn't think a lot about it. And one flight became another flight, became another flight, and the next thing we knew, we're literally above the Arctic Circle, and I've got summer clothes, and I mean, it's August, but we're at the Arctic Circle, and I started to think this might not have been such a good idea. I probably should have got a little more info. So that's, and we went up, we were there for days and days and days, and like I said, I don't know how much planning went into that trip, but I sure don't know if there was any at all. So I didn't have any warm clothes, and there was abandoned cabins up there, and I wound up wearing wool stuff from the 40s and the 50s from somebody that had lived up there years ago, just trying to stay warm. And time had no meaning to Jalen. He didn't know what day of the week it is or when things were going on. He just didn't care. He's just doing what he does. And so, we were up there, me and him and Lynn, for, 3, 4, 5 days eating peanut butter and jelly and just whatever we could get on the plane with us. And so we got done with what we were doing. We started heading home, and I didn't think about it either. We got home about 3 o'clock in the morning after bush plane to Kotzebue to Nome to Anchorage to Phoenix to Vegas to home. And so we pulled in house about 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I realized I actually had to be to school for my first day of my senior year in about 2 hours. So after all that, so that's what I learned from Jalen. You probably ought to ask the stupid questions like, where are we going? How long are we going to be there? So that's all I had. Jalen, he was just so great. And you never knew what you were going to get from day to day. Thank you.
I will tell you that growing up with Jay Lynn is a treasure. I learned a lot from him. And believe me, I've got some scars to prove it. But he has had such a big impact on my life. And I'm grateful for him, for being the big brother that he is. And Jay Lynn and Alan, they were such a team together. They would hang me on the doorknob by my belt when I got a little bit too close for comfort, when they wanted to do something and without me tagging along. But John talked about Jay Lynn and the planning. We went for a trip over to Nebraska to pick up a payloader one time. We went on the semi and went over through Colorado and it was just into Nebraska. We picked up the loader and we came back, and of course you have to go through a tunnel on the freeway. And the problem was that we were about 6-8 inches too high. And but you know Jay Lynn, he's very resourceful and he can figure anything out. I mean, he's an engineer, he's a heavy equipment worker, he's a farmer, he knows how to do this stuff. He's an architect, he figures these things out. So we got there and we thought, well, we could drive around, but Jay Lynn says, no, I've got this figured out. So we just let all the air out of all the tires, and we made it by a ½ inch. We were able to go through the tunnel. And so sometimes Jay Lynn didn't plan well, but he adapted and adjusted his life. And he was always thinking of other people. And there are so many times that Jay Lynn would stop and drop whatever he had going because somebody needed help. Whether it was when the river was flooding and somebody needed a cat to move some dirt to save their home. Whether it was somebody needed some cows to haul and he had the semi and the trailer to be able to do it. No matter what it was, he was able to figure that out. And if he didn't have the equipment, he knew somebody who did, and he'd do some horse trading to try to make some things happen so that people could get what they needed done when they needed it. And gonna miss him. Look forward to seeing him again. And so that we can catch up on what we've been doing. But I'm grateful for Jay Lynn, grateful for his life, grateful for his love, his compassion, and example.
I don't think any of us want to be here, but I appreciate the chance to try to say a few things. And Jimmy's advice was good, Bishop. Jimmy's advice was good on keeping it respectful here for all of us, because we all have some really great memories. We did so many things. And have a lot more to do. I hope you all saw the picture of us on the motorcycle. I figured that was about 550 pounds on our little bike. We thought we were so funny. I always used to say, if we could have, years ago, before it got to be a thing, and I can't do this in 60 seconds, I'm sorry. If we could have filmed a Discovery Channel reality show with a crazy bunch of us that used to hang around with JT, Rusty Banks, the Sorensen boys, it would have been the best show on TV, I promise you. As you know, Mike getting plowed over by a cow, and then seeing those two fighting. They loved each other, but it was fun. Many road trips, big equipment and things. Jalen had the ability to snore when he was awake. And there was a trip with me, my dad, and Jay Lynn. We're in Northern California in a dumpy little rodeo motel room. And I was in the middle of those two snoring. And I had to go out and sleep in the truck. And we laughed about that so many times. Picking up good deals all over the country, as everybody knows. Yes. I remember we picked up a crane for Uncle Tom out in Tooele. We were bringing that back, and there was a tank sitting there. And he wanted to buy that tank. And I said, what are you going to do with that? He said, I don't know, I just want to have it. I said, no. And he said, well, he says, I'm going to park it in the yard and hang it over at Lynn Hills. Keep him guessing. Is Lynn here? Driving across Texas, he was going to buy one of those oil pumps and put it in the yard just to keep us all guessing to see what was going on. On and on, like hundreds of stories. He picked me up in his truck with the dogs, heater on 97 degrees. And we'd ride around, and I'd be sitting, he'd reach over there, right across the field. Look at that over there. Oh, I loved it. He was always there to help all of us. That's why we're here. I'd say I always thought what was mine, and what was his was mine. And he always knew he'd help us all out. Zeb, you know what I'm talking about. He never judged any of us. He was just a true friend. I'll try to get wrapped up here. But one thing you might not know, he loved his mission. He had a testimony. We talked about this. Any chance he could talk and share stories about that, he would do that. He loved the dogs. He loved all the grandkids. He'd tell me what all you kids were up to, and I know he was very proud. And you're gonna miss him. I don't know a world without having him there. Thank you.
Wasn't sure what I was going to say, but a couple minutes ago when they were closing up the casket, I only had one thought playing in my mind over and over again, and it was how disappointed I was of all of you in the room because no phones went off and no one was there to answer it in true Jalen fashion, so nothing quite like answering the phone at an inopportune moment. When I think about all the memories and things, there's a lot, but I think the one that stands out the most is with our infamous trip to Disneyland. He was having some hip pain and some back pain, and John decided to give him a little bit of medication that he was on. Ended up higher than a kite, real happy the rest of the day. But he decided that he wanted to go back to the room and take a nap, but before that could happen, he had the munchies, and so we stopped at IHOP, and he ordered a stack of pancakes, a 3-egg, 3-bacon, 3-sausage, hash brown breakfast, the Thanksgiving turkey platter, and a Coke because they didn't have Pepsi products. And this is an IHOP in California outside of Disneyland, and I'm in high school and I offered to pay, and I said, you know what, I don't know if I can afford this bill. The first time I've seen two people rack up $60 at an IHOP. When I think about the memories with him, there's so many small things, trips to the gross and greasy Mi Ranch burrito that we liked anyways for the lunch special. Always had to have a number 9 with the lemonade. Or trucking trips to take apples to Colorado. And every time I went with him, he blew 2 tires because he filled the truck about 7,000 pounds heavier than its limit. But that was the way that it was. He was going to do it his way, and it didn't matter what obstacles got in the way or what obstacles he even created for himself. He was going to get it done the way he had in mind. Like I said earlier, when I think about memories with him, it's just dozens of little things, nothing too big, nothing too crazy. But it didn't need to be big or crazy for him to leave an impact in your life. Because I think above anybody else, Jalen understood the principle that happiness is only real when it's shared. Thank you.
I got to know Jalen. We married the Hallam sisters. Jalen married Jane Ann and I married Jeanette. As I got to know Jalen, I learned to appreciate there are 2 kinds of people. Those who will dazzle you with their brilliance, or baffle you with their stories. Well, I thought Jalen was the latter. Well, on the tradition at Hallam's was that they loved to have Sunday evening games, and they decided to do Trivial Pursuits. Well, you know the Hallam's, they're all valedictorian type people, and so it was going to be the girls against the guys. Well, I just thought, well, that's stacked. We're just going to get we're going to get kicked out of there. We're going to get beat up. And I just couldn't believe it. Jalen knew the answer to everything. And the more it went on, the harder I laughed. I mean, I didn't know anything. And it was fun to realize that here's a guy who I always listened to his stories, and I didn't give much credence. But from then on, when Jalen was telling me a story, I was paying attention. I really, he won my respect. Now, on the other side, we were going somewhere, and he said, "Vic, do you know who this is on the radio? This country song." I'm thinking, man, I don't have a clue. I knew who it wasn't. It was George Strait. It wasn't. So I said, "Well, it's Tex Ritter." He looks at me, he says, "Vic, I can't believe you knew that." And I'm thinking, I can't believe I knew that either. So the funny thing is that Jalen won my respect with real knowledge, and I won his respect with a shot in the dark. Now, Jane Ann preceded my wife in death. The Hallam fibrillation heart condition, and then shortly thereafter my wife passed away. Because of that, we had a lot in common, and I always wanted to spend more time, and I think there's a story in this for all of us. We always talked about doing double dates and going out and sharing that time together. And it's my regret that we didn't do that. And I hope to learn not to let those opportunities go by. I've got 2 boys watching this streaming out in New York. I want to say hello to them and tell them I love them. Thank you for your time.
I have a couple of stories that about Jalen probably nobody really knows about. Well, or maybe some people know about. But growing up, he and I were pretty much inseparable. We were not only brothers, but we were best friends also. And we did a lot of things. We had a lot of fun going to the cow shows. People think that Jalen just loved his tractors, but
he really liked showing the cows too. He was really good at it. He won many fitting showmanship competitions, and he was my competition. And I think, let me think a couple of stories that you'd like to know about. Oh, when he was on his mission, you know, on missions have a lot of rules and everything, and you know, if you know Jay Lynn, they ran across a guy that had a old Spitfire airplane, and he really wanted to go up in that, and so he actually did. He went up in the Spitfire airplane when he was on his mission in England. And I don't think his companion felt the same way, but he really wanted to do that, so he decided he was going to do it. So that's Jay Lynn. And we had a lot of other stories. He'd come down to Arizona a lot, and we'd go down and do things with my sister's husband and my nephew, and we'd go out in the desert. And one time we went in one of these old mine shafts, and Jay Lynn come out of the mine shaft with a ringtail cat. It was just hanging there, it was clawing at him, and it grabbed his belt. And he just brought it out so we could get pictures of it and everything. And he was sitting there holding that cat. And he was sitting there biting his belt and clawing at him. And he couldn't get away fast enough. But took a few pictures, and then he let the ringtail cat go, and it went back into the mine. But he was always out for things like that. And one time they went out, my nephew, they caught a bobcat in a fishing net. And he just always did for doing something out of the ordinary. And we did a lot of the other things. We went to my grandpa Partridge a lot. He taught us, and not my Uncle Jay, taught us how to fish. They were good fishermen. And that was some good times. And we were always going to Grandma and Grandpa Johnson's if Mom couldn't find us. She knew we were down at the river or down there somewhere. So she'd call Grandma and say, "Have you seen the kids?" They said, "Oh, they're probably down at the river." And so that's where they knew how to find us. So anyway, that's some stories about him that maybe a lot of people don't know. But he did really like the cows. You wouldn't think with the farm and stuff, he kind of liked the farming too, but kind of left the cow part to me. But so it kind of worked out good for us. But we're really going to miss him, and he it's hard to believe everything, and you know, he's just like my best friend. So anyway, let's say this name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
I got to know Jay Lynn through Marin and her husband Elburn. Had some great times, and there's a lot of times that you can't. There's not enough time to tell all of them either. But the one that sticks in my mind the most is that when we went over pheasant hunting over on the farm. At that time there was a lot of pheasants, but you had to watch out for him. You had to make sure he was in front of you, because if he got behind you, that cuss, he'd catch a pheasant. He didn't shoot it, he'd catch it. And then he'd walk up by you, and he'd throw it between your legs, and hey, you jumped so high, or something else happened, you know. He was a character. I'm gonna miss him, I can't believe it, but he's a good man. He's, like they said, he'd give his shirt off his back for you if you needed it. Thank you.
I got the word that Jay's passed, and it's been a rough week. I feel like I lost one of my arms. I'm the nephew that grew up on the dairy farm with a kid that I got to spend all my summers as a child growing up. And one of the things Jay Lynn was able to contribute to my life is we work hard and we play hard. That was my dad's legacy. When I worked on the farm, Jay Lynn said it's good to work hard, but it's also good to play a little bit in between. And I remember one summer, I don't know, we got 1,000 shot needles from on the cows, and I washed them and cleaned them out, filled them full of water. And I was young, using them for like a squirt gun. We didn't actually go out and spend the money for a squirt gun. I had to come up with something else. And he got wind of that, and we started shooting each other one day. And or we get by the ditch bank, goes, come look at this, man. And I go by the ditch bank, look at what he's looking at, and he take a shovel and shoot the water around me. And by lunchtime, I was at 2 and he was at 30. He got me at least 30 times that day. And I knew that he was leaving to go up the canyon, pick a load of cows up. And so I climbed inside the semi truck and I found a small bucket and I filled it full of water and I stuck it inside the driver's seat. And I tied a rope to the door handle and I went and found him because I knew he was getting ready to go. And sure as heck, he found me and he goes, hey, I've had fun with you today. He goes, I'm going to show you something. I go, wait, my show. And he takes his drink and he throws it on me. He takes off running. And so I'm chasing him and I a lot skinnier than I am right now. But I was chasing him just to see Jalen running cowboy boots was a sight and scene in its own. But he's running the semi-truck and I jumped running right behind just fast enough that he could get ahead of me. And because he didn't know what was waiting for him. And he opened that door up without any hesitation. His bucket of water came out and just drenched me. And he's looking at this, and he's looking at the semi, and he's looking at me, and I'm laughing hard. And he started coming chasing me, and I thought, he's going to kill me. So I took off the grounds house, I locked the door, and he didn't come up. But when I did catch up with him the next day, I mean, he was just sopping wet. He wasn't mad. He was actually pretty impressed. I thought 2 hours in advance how to get him. And that was our last water fight. But years down the road, we got into guns down in Arizona, and him and my dad, they spent a lot of time together. My dad had this .357, it's supposed to be the best thing in the whole earth, and Jalen just bought this new pistol, and it shot rifle shells out of it. And they were out there in the desert, in the middle of nowhere. And they found an old 50s car, and they're shooting the bumper to see who puts the biggest dent in the bumper. And my dad's thinking his is better, and Jalen's shooting his, and he's thinking his better. I'm kind of getting bored in between, so I had a .38 revolver. I had probably 14 at the time, and I was shooting the car as well. And one time I took a shot, and I hit the bumper, and the shell came back and it hit me in the chest. And my dad was on one side, and Jalen's on the other side. And the next thing I know, after I shot the trigger, I was laying on the ground just staring at the sky. My dad's looking at me like, what are you doing down there? And Jay's looking at, what are you doing down there? And I'm ready for my chest and looking to see where I was hit. And I had a thermometer on my chest and it hit it, and I was okay. And Jay goes, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm okay. He goes, well, go to the truck and get some more shells. And we're worried about this competition of a 357 versus hit versus me just getting hit with the shells. So, but Jay, was always fun, and I know his journey isn't over. Bless the Lord to continue with him in his journey. I asked the Lord to continue to bless his family. I do without him. That's the name of Jesus Christ.
Well, what everybody said so far, ditto. But Jalen is a very special guy. And he's one of my oldest friends, unless it's Alan. And he loved his family. He's had two very special women in his life. And he was always talking about his kids and grandkids. And you just don't know which story to tell, because there's so many. But one thing is, the reason Alan got into milking cows is because Jalen hated milking cows. And we spent most nights after we got our chores done in school hiding from Ernie and Uncle Don so we could go hunting. And that left Alan at the dairy. So, but anyway, most generous guy I've ever known. And a lot of us owe him a debt that we can never repay. Well, mostly because he'd never let us keep it. So, anyway, thank you.
We want to hear from a few grandkids now, and Jalen. But thank you all the friends that have told us great stories about that.
One of my favorite stories is when we went to Disneyland. We were going through security and and he had a knife, just a small pocket knife on him, and the guard said, "You can't have that here. You're gonna have to go back to your hotel room and drop it off there." So he's like, "Okay," leaves. And then probably about 5 minutes later, he comes back, and the guard's like, "That's not enough time to go to your hotel room. Where'd you put it?" So he goes and he takes him down to where they put it, and he had hidden it in a bush.
I haven't been to a service where this has been an opportunity, and so I sat down there and wondered whether I should say anything or not. But Jalen and Albert Cordy and I are inseparable in high school, and we spend every evening, every weekend in each other's homes clear through high school. And there were a lot of things that went on. As I listened to some of these stories, I think there's literally thousands of those out there, and some of them's going to take a triple dog dare to get somebody to tell them. I'm pretty sure that the statutes of limitation have run out on a couple of these, but I mentioned this in John the other night. This is 35 years ago. Jalen had some snowmobiles, and he invited the family to go up to Payson Lakes, so we went up there, and we actually had a good time. But when we were almost up the lakes, and Forest Service rangers came and wanted to check registration on the snowmobiles, and if you know Jalen and most other farmers, that would be the last thing that they would have current registration on. So I was, well, it was about 30 degrees up there, and I'd sweat clear through all my clothes because I was worried about it. I thought we'd be sighted. They didn't have the snowmobiles, and we'd be stuck up there. Because I knew Jalen wouldn't have those registered, so he just calmly walked over and opened up the boxes and pulled out all the papers, and gosh, they were registered, they were legal. And John said, well, he said, that's probably the only thing on the farm was. Everything else is at least, 3 or 4 years out. And I'm gonna do the same thing. The other thing I thought of as we were talking, and those of you that are my vintage, Main Street was the place to be every night. And that's where you met. And there were a lot of things that went on Main Street. And one of the things, there was a lot of things thrown, and it started with water balloons. And you pull up to a stop sign and motion for them to roll their window down, they roll them down, and you fill them with water balloons. Well, I thought, well, I'd top that, so I put a 50-gallon drum in the back of the truck with a high-pressure pump on, and we'd do that and open the window down and literally fill the car full. Well, Chris Shepard thought, well, I can top that, so he brought not cartons of eggs, but cases of eggs, and we'd throw those. And then again, Jalen, had to top that, so he started bringing gallons of whole milk. And that went out the window. So if you have dry eggs and you have milk that sits in your interior conditioner cloth and stinks, you have a lasting smell forever. The one other thing we did, and don't worry about this, it's like when I tell the students I teach now that I was the 9th grade seminary president, and they just roar. Can't believe that would ever happen. The other thing we do, again, for entertainment, we didn't have all the, video games and all that. We pick up flashing barricade signs and get going about 50 miles an hour, and we'd have a driver, and Jalen had the longest arms, and he could throw the farthest. So we'd have a target alongside the road. It wasn't vehicles, but there was a lot of mailboxes, okay? And you'd see who could, come the closest, if not, take it out. So there's a whole lot of incredible memories with Jalen and fun, and I don't think any of it was meant to harm anyone or any person, but a lot of them there, and that's just a few I remember. There's thousands more out there, and it's been mentioned that Jalen would let you borrow, take whatever he had to help out. He was a very, very giving person. Thank you.
Well, it's been fun listening to everyone share their stories, and one of the funnest things was traveling with Dad. And sometimes you had a great time, sometimes you didn't. But one of my favorite memories was this past summer. I was 7 months pregnant and got put in the front seat with Dad while he was driving. And if you've ever had that privilege, you know it's very entertaining, because he'd take his arm without a second thought and go, look over there, right in front of your face. And you don't do that to a 7-month pregnant hormonal woman stuck in a car for 8 hours. And he'd constantly, no, look over there, and keep pointing, and I'd turn around and yell at him. And Dad and Jay Ryan and Marilee were snickering in the back seat because we were just arguing back and forth. And the best part about that was after that trip of hours of him pointing in my face or trying to steal my food and trying to get me to feed him, was he tried really hard after that not to point in your face as he was driving down the road and be like, hey, look over there. Where do you want us to look? And that was fun. And there was, my favorite memories so far are those watching him with Abby. They were 2 peas in a pod. Any chance he could get, he would take her and he'd run her upstairs, throw on YouTube, and play ELO for her. Loud as can be. He'd be dancing with her, telling her all the stories, every single song, and every time it stopped, she'd start bawling and make the music start again, so he'd play it again. Anywhere we'd go, he'd be like, do I need to turn the music on? Let's get the 60s music on. And every time 60s turns on the radio, she's smiling, and I know she's thinking about her grandpa.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing all those memories. We really appreciate that. If anybody else has any memories to share, or if you don't want to incriminate yourself up here on the stand, there's some cards out by the sign-in book that you can write down a memory and leave there if you like.
I don't know whether to say good morning or good afternoon. This has probably been one of the funnest funerals I've ever been to. Jalen has been a great influence in my life, and it's a privilege to have been asked by the family to stand here today. And I know that he loved his family, and he loved each of you, because you couldn't meet Jalen without him loving you or you loving him. He just had a magnetic personality. For those of you that don't know me, my name is David Johnson. I'm Jalen's cousin, his neighbor, and I like to think of myself as his friend. I mean, Jalen was a friend to all. I wrote this down so I don't screw it up. Anyway, I'm just going to read this. I don't normally read my talks, but I didn't want to miss what I was trying to put out. I was asked to share a scripture and then my testimony. And the very first scripture that came to my mind when I thought of Jaylin was, it's found in Matthew 25, verse 14 through 30. And it's the parable of the talents. And for those of you that aren't familiar with that, I'd like to just read it in part. Matthew 25, verse 14 through 18 reads, "For the kingdom of heaven is as a man traveling into a far country, who calls his own servants and delivers unto them his goods. And unto one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to every man according to his servant's abilities. And straightway took his journey. Then he who had received the 5 talents went and traded with the same, and made them another 5 talents. And likewise, he that had received 2 also gained another 2. But he who had received 1 went and digged in the earth, and hid his Lord's money." I compare Jaylin to the servant who received the 5 talents. Jaylin was a very talented, very knowledgeable, very capable individual. He was always willing to share his talents, his capabilities, his knowledge with whoever he came in contact with. And by doing so, he was blessed with more talents and abilities. The more you share, the more you receive. Jaylin helped us and helped me in so many ways. Me personally, I mean, one of my most embarrassing moments was when I was out working around the pond in my backhoe, and I backed my backhoe into the pond. And I didn't know how I was going to get a backhoe out of the pond. And so I humbly stuck my tail between my legs and went up and asked Jaylin to come down and help. Of course, after taking a little bit of razzing, he was able to help us get the backhoe out of the pond. I still have the backhoe. A few years ago, we had a hay farm, or a hay fire in our hay barn. And 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and Jay was one of the very first people there with his loader to help us get the hay out of the barn so we didn't lose the barn. Very unselfish. And then just recently, last summer, we did a big land leveling project, put in some new ditches. And Jay came down, lined us out, got us started, made sure we stayed on the right path, and helped us get us going, and then he'd come back and help make sure it was going good. Really appreciated him and his knowledge to help us get started and help us with equipment, things that he had. So I really compare Jay to this servant who received 5 talents. And I pray that we can take a note from his book and share with others what we've been blessed with. And then back to the parable. I believe Jaylin was received, as it says in verse 21 of the same parable, Matthew 25. His Lord said unto him, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Thou hast been faithful over a few things. I will make thee ruler over many things. Enter thou into the joy of thy salvation." Brothers and sisters, I don't have anything to add to how much Jaylin influenced each of us. My testimony that God, our Heavenly Father, lives in His Son, Jesus Christ, and they love us. And through the atonement of Jesus Christ, we can all return and live in His presence again. I bear this testimony to you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
This week, tons of memories have flooded into my mind and my heart, my soul. But as I think about one that has the most impact on me, was about 30 years ago, 29 years ago, February 1st. Adam and I was standing in this building at the edges of the baptism.